Hello, everyone. I'm Rohan Modi, and I'll be moderator for today's session. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone based upon the time zones you are in. A very warm welcome for today's session on TUMIVolt Charging Station. And I would like to inform that this session has been presented with support of Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, Germany. The topic of today's session will be full lifecycle service model for eBuses. The agenda for today's session will be a quick introduction to the speaker. Then we'll move on to the expert's presentation from our speaker. And at the end, we'll be taking the Q&As. So quick glance onto the house rules. So we will request everyone to please keep your camera and microphone off during the presentation. Please feel free to write your questions and queries in the chat box, and we will also give opportunity to all of you at the end of the session to maybe ask your question by switching on your cameras. And yes, question and answers will be taken at the end of the session. And just for your information, this session is being recorded and it will be uploaded and disseminated through further channels of TUMI over the YouTube and TUMI website. So the speaker of today's session will be Mr. Bradley Fox from Zenobe. A very warm welcome to Mr. Bradley Fox. Zenobe is the leading owner and operator of battery storage in UK, and it owns and operates a third of the UK's electric vehicle bus fleet. Bradley has over 10 years of experience in corporate and investment banking, mainly around the topics of structured asset financing and relationship management. At Zenobe, he leads the team for procurement and also works towards optimizing underlying finance to facilitate Zenobe's EV fleet projects. He has previously worked at Sandler, Lloyds Bank, and Barclays, and have executed a range of complex financing structure across many sectors. He holds a first-class BSc degree in Business and Management from the University of Nottingham. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the screen to Mr. Bradley Fox. Bradley, the screen is yours.
Thanks, Rohan. I really appreciate that introduction. Bear with me 2 seconds and I will share my screen. And hopefully you'll bear with me. I'm going to be jumping around between a few other screens to show you a demonstration of our smart charging platform, as well as one or two videos. So bear with me whilst I do that. So hopefully you can now see my hopefully you can now see my screen, if that works. Excellent. Yes, so my name is Bradley. I'm a business development director at Zenobe. As Rohan's mentioned, I've been with the business now coming up to 2 years. My background is primarily finance, and today I'm going to talk to you about the proposition and partnerships that we form with our electric bus and fleet operators who are looking to transition to zero emission electric fleets. I'm going to talk a bit about some of the innovative solutions that we've established to help operators access the amount of power that they need to be able to charge their fleet, because that is generally speaking the first and foremost most important challenge that an operator or a fleet provider needs to overcome to be able to make the transition to electric. I will then give a bit of details of our proposition from a finance and managed service perspective. The kind of ethos of Zenobe is to try and make the transition for an operator as easy as possible. It is a step change in how an operator has to manage their operations, moving from diesel to an electric fleet. So what we try and do is we try and make it as operationally easy as possible, supporting them throughout the whole process, along with helping them from a cost perspective, because that's one of the other challenges associated with transitioning to electric from a diesel or a hybrid fleet, is that at first look, the costs can be more expensive, but what we try and do is we try to present it on a total cost of ownership model, whereby the operator can rather be paying a monthly fee rather than the high upfront capital cost, and they can spread the cost of the infrastructure and the vehicle over time. But we'll come on to a bit more detail in due course on our proposition. And we can also talk about what Zenobe does in terms of residual values and holding the battery technology risk on behalf of its customers, as well as how we've used battery energy storage assets to be able to help our customers overcome that challenge that I mentioned earlier about accessing power to be able to charge their fleet in a cost-effective way. And then finally, I'll provide a bit of a demonstration on our smart charging software platform, which is what our customers get access to. But what that allows us to do is it enables us to essentially take control of the charging operations from the operator, because we are able to control which vehicle's being charged when and at what rate of power that vehicle's being charged at, so that if you've got an 8-hour window to charge your vehicles, you don't need to charge them all at the same time. You can spread that charging requirement over the full window and try and keep your peak power requirements as low as possible, so that it makes your access to power as cost effective as you can, whilst also limiting the amount of power that you actually require to be able to charge your fleet. So if I start a bit about...
Sorry to interrupt,
oh, of course.
Bradley. Sorry to interrupt, Bradley. Could you please make your screen in presentation mode?
Yeah, bear with me 2 seconds.
You can click on the 3 dots on the bottom, or the display setting. That works as well. Yeah, should work as well.
Oh, has that done it?
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you. Apologies about that. So first of all, a bit of background to Zenobe as a business. The business was started 3 years ago now by the 3 founding directors. The business was initially set up to focus on large-scale industrial batteries. So these are large battery energy storage assets that sit in containers in fields, and their primary purpose is to support the UK's national grid infrastructure system in terms of the provision of power in the UK. The important thing about highlighting that is that this is what's enabled Zenobe to become an expert in batteries as an asset class. We need to be able to control those battery energy storage assets within milliseconds to be able to meet national grid's requirements to be able to be a supplier in that market. And essentially at a very high level, what those batteries do is that when there's excess power on the grid, the batteries store that energy, and when there's not enough power on the grid, the batteries then disperse that energy back into the system. But importantly, what that's also done is it has enabled us to establish really strong relationships with a number of the leading battery suppliers in the world. So our primary suppliers for our battery energy storage business are BYD, who are clearly a battery provider to one of the main bus manufacturers, as well as producing their own vehicle from an electric perspective, as well as CATL, who supports the Yutong vehicle. So from that side of the business, we've essentially diversified and we've moved into EV infrastructure and vehicle financing, as well as offering battery as a service, because we've developed an expertise in batteries as an asset class, and B, we also want to own a large amount of batteries that are sitting on vehicles, as the underlying premise of our business model is that when those batteries are no longer fit for purpose on the vehicle, we want to recycle those batteries and use them in a secondary life application. Using batteries on vehicles is probably the worst application for a battery. You're using it in an uncontrolled temperature environment. It's doing full charging, full discharging on a daily basis, and it's being used to move a heavy goods vehicle. Whereas batteries that are used in a stationary application are in a controlled temperature environment, short, sharp discharges, and hence when the battery comes off the vehicle, it's kind of expected to still have a 75% useful life remaining, but just not in the primary application of battery storage. Importantly, Zenobe's established really strong partners from both an equity and debt perspective. So when we're investing our capital in our customers' electrification projects, they've got the comfort that Zenobe's got strong backing from a financial perspective. And in terms of our stationary storage asset portfolio, today we've got 75 megawatts worth of batteries in action, and we've got another 125 megawatts of stationary batteries in development being built at the moment, which will hopefully go live back end of next year, early 2023. If I now go on to talk a bit about some of our live projects in the electrification space. So we've been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work with a number of the major bus operators in the UK, including the likes of Stagecoach, Abellio, National Express. We've supported coming up to over 150 to 200 vehicles across a range of different vehicle manufacturers. We're now currently doing our first project abroad, which is over in Sydney in Australia, where we're supporting the first major introduction of electric vehicles over there, with 40 BYD vehicles supporting Transport for New South Wales. And given the footprint of a number of our customers, like the likes of National Express and Arriva across North America and broader Europe, we're already having good conversations with a number of operators in mainland Europe, North America as well, in terms of supporting them with their electrification projects. So this is just another diagram kind of showing a bit of an overview of where our presence is at the moment. And as I say, we're very keen to start moving internationally. Just got some pictures here of some of Zenobe's live sites that we're working on. If you have a look in the middle there, you can see some of the battery energy storage assets that we use at some of our sites to help them with their power requirements. But I'll go into a bit more detail shortly as to what a battery energy storage asset does and how it helps operators overcome the problem or the challenge of ensuring they have enough power at some of their sites. So these pictures here this is our project with Stagecoach supporting their Guildford Park and Ride scheme, where they've introduced 9 electric vehicles over there. This is our project with National Express over in the Midlands. This is our one in London with Abellio, where we're supporting 34 Caetano bus vehicles to support 2 Transport for London routes. So if I wanted to talk a bit about how Zenobe works with our customers and what our underlying strategy is when we work with them as they look to introduce electric vehicles. So I think the main challenges that I touched upon earlier in my presentation that an operator has when moving to electric is, the first one is always accessing the amount of power that they need to be able to charge their fleet. At the moment, operators are generally speaking very low consumers of power and typically very high consumers of diesel or fuel, whereas hopefully over the future that will change. So the first thing that we can help them overcome with is accessing that power. And what we do is we work with our customers who send us their running boards or their routes, and they also send us the their parking layout, and what we do is we ultimately work with them to design all the infrastructure that they require for the site, whether that's a charging gun solution or pantograph or other technologies. Zenobe is not a manufacturer, but we've got key partners who we work with in terms of the charging technology so that we can design the optimum solution to help our customers meet their requirements. One of the other major challenges is definitely the upfront cost of the charging infrastructure, ensuring that an operator has the necessary equipment so that they're able to support the charging requirements of their fleet. And the third key challenge that we see is clearly an electric vehicle at the moment is roughly double the price of a diesel or a hybrid vehicle. And the other key challenge is the battery technology risk. So from most operators that we speak to, they see that the minimum useful life of an electric bus is going to be at least 15 years. However, the battery is more likely to fail after somewhere between 7 or 8 years. And by fail, I mean no longer fit for purpose on the vehicle, because batteries degrade over time. And ultimately, in 7 or 8 years' time, due to degradation, the battery capacity won't be sufficient to support the mileage requirements of the routes. And Zenobe's proposition from a full turnkey offering is to try help operators overcome all of those challenges, particularly from a cost perspective, as well as making hopefully it as easy as possible for an operator to make the switch. So the first stage of a project we always see is the strategy and design, coming up with the right technology, establishing how much power is required at the site, determining what the optimum parking layout is for that depot, given some of the challenges associated with the first vehicle in, ultimately ideally being the first vehicle out rather than the last vehicle out. So we work with them to design the optimum parking layout, and then we also work with them to procure the amount of power that they'll need for their site. So using our sophisticated algorithms and models, we take the running boards, we process them through our systems, and we determine what the peak power requirement is for that fleet. Then we work with the operator to procure that power, the necessary level of power to be able to support that peak power requirement. And then once we've decided what technology they're going for and what the design and site setup will be, Zenobe manages the full build of that charging infrastructure, clearly adhering to the highest health and safety standards, and always looking to minimise the operational impact that installing electric infrastructure can have at the depot. And then our typical offering is that Zenobe will also pay for all of the charging infrastructure up front. So we'll pay for all the civils, all the construction work, all the chargers, and all the equipment that's required for the project. And then ultimately we enter into a long-term finance and managed service contract with our underlying customer, typically 10 to 15 years. And what our customer does is they will pay us a fixed monthly fee over the duration of that contract, which covers the capital cost of the equipment, as well as Zenobe's ongoing services to maintain the equipment and access to our smart charging software, which I'll share more details on shortly. And importantly, what Zenobe does is we provide a guarantee to our operator that if there is any lost mileage due to charging issues, we pay service credits to cover the operational impact that that has on the operator, which incentivizes us to always ensure that the equipment is working, and if there are any issues, we resolve them as quickly as possible using access to our 24-hour support desks. So from our perspective, whilst we kind of support the project clearly through the strategy and design and the build, the project actually only really starts once it's all live and up and running, as we become the operator's long-term charging partner. They're with them for the duration of their project, controlling which vehicle's being charged when and at what rate of power that vehicle's being charged at. So if I kind of provide an overview of what our full turnkey offering is, is we support the charging infrastructure as I've just highlighted. We've got innovative ways of supporting the power requirements of the fleet using battery energy storage assets if they're a viable option from a cost perspective, and I'll share some more detail shortly as to how that works. We have our software, which helps us implement smart charging to give the operator comfort that all their vehicles will be charged in the morning. All they need to do is plug the vehicles in and walk away. And then importantly, we also help from a financing perspective so that the operator can try and lower the total cost of ownership. So that when they're looking at their electric vehicle operations, they're focusing on what a monthly cost is to run their fleet, rather than having to focus on the higher upfront cost associated with installing the charging infrastructure, as well as the higher upfront cost of the vehicle. And then importantly, we also take away that battery technology risk from the operator by providing our battery managed service. And I'll share a bit more details now as we go through Zenobe's offering. So we've covered our charging service agreement, which supports the charging infrastructure. But then when it comes to the vehicles, Zenobe essentially splits the vehicle into two. We split it into the battery and then all the other components, which we call the chassis or the husk, or the body of the vehicle. In terms of the battery element, we provide that on a battery as a service model. Essentially, Zenobe pays for the battery up front, and then we guarantee that there will always be a battery that meets the minimum capacity requirements of the route. So as and when that first life battery fails, whether that's at year 7, year 8, year 9, Zenobe will cover the cost of the replacement battery, so that the operator has a fixed fee over the duration of our contract, whether that's 10 or 15 years. And ultimately, they know that they will always have access to a battery that meets the requirements for their route. And where Zenobe has found that we're really competitive on that perspective is that our customer is not actually paying for the full cost of the battery. And the reason for that is that we are holding residual values in that battery, because we want to use that battery in a secondary application once it's no longer fit for purpose on the vehicle, in either a stationary application supporting national grid, or even in a stationary application supporting the power requirements of the depot. And I can give you an example of that shortly. I'll show you a short video of one of the batteries that we've taken off a vehicle and we've actually repurposed to use as a stationary energy storage asset. And the other contract that we typically enter into with our customer is because they want a full financing proposition for their vehicle, is we provide a more vanilla leasing option in respect of the body or the husk or the chassis of the vehicle, so that our customer can have a fixed monthly payment from Zenobe, which covers the charging infrastructure, the battery managed service, as well as the body of the vehicle. If you don't mind, I'll quickly show you a quick video of one of our second life projects. Hopefully you can still see my screen. And if I share this with you quickly, hopefully you can see this.
Yes, we see it. We do not hear anything.
So as you saw there, that's one of our first Second Life projects, and what we've done there is that we've used an old a bus battery that was operating in Sweden, and then we've now transform that into a portable battery that's actually supporting Extreme E, which is a new form of green motor racing to support the power requirements of the events as they travel around the globe. But we've actually also used a similar concept by using a battery energy storage asset at a depot. So what we do there is if I show you a quick picture here. So what the battery energy storage asset does is essentially, whilst the vehicles are out on service, the battery energy storage asset charges from the power from the grid, and then overnight when the vehicles need to be charged, we use that battery energy storage asset to support the additional power requirements over and above what the grid. So if you have a look at this diagram here, you can see along the bottom you've got the time of day, and then up the vertical axes you've got the amount of power that's being consumed, and the purple line shows the charging requirements of the battery energy storage asset, and the orange line is showing the charging requirements of the fleet. At this depot we had a 200 kVA grid limit, and to get access to additional power was extremely expensive because they were in an area which was consuming lots of power. They're right next to a manufacturing site. So this is actually Stagecoach's operations over at Guildford. And essentially what you can see here is that the purple line, which represents the battery energy storage asset, it is essentially providing the additional power that is required over and above the grid limit. And as you can see here, that everything below the line is actually the battery energy storage asset charging from the grid. So we were dispersing power through the middle of the night when the vehicles needed to be charged. And then once the vehicles were out on service, starting going out en route at 5-6 o'clock in the morning, we use the grid to be able to recharge that battery. So what that enables them to do is it enables them to keep their peak power requirements to a minimum. If I show you here, I can show you a quick video of us actually installing a battery energy storage asset at our Newport bus depot. So that we think this is quite an innovative solution. It also goes really well with solar. So a number of our depots, we've got solar panels on the roofs of those depots, and essentially all the power that is generated from the solar is stored within the battery energy storage asset, and then we're actually able to use that power to charge the vehicles overnight. And as highlighted earlier, at one of our projects over in National Express in the Midlands, we're actually using an old bus battery as the battery energy storage asset in the depot, essentially giving it a second life to be able to help charge the vehicles, which, as highlighted earlier, is a key element of the Zenobe proposition, and is what allows us to offer a battery as a service. So hopefully that's given you some food for thoughts on that front. And what I thought would be a good idea next was just to take you through a few of the case studies that some of our live projects that we've got in place at the moment, and what the interesting things were at those projects. So one of our most recent projects was with Stagecoach, supporting a Transport for London route. And I think the key focus for them was they actually had a relatively short charging window to support the charging requirements of the fleet. So the key aspect for them was ensuring that they had a really high power charger. So this is the first project where we've actually used 180 kilowatt charger, which has enabled them to significantly reduce the charging time for their fleet. Another key project that we've worked on was National Express, where what we've highlighted here is that they had problems accessing power, and this is one of the first projects where we've used the battery energy storage asset to help them with the charging requirements of their fleet. And as highlighted, it is kind of one of the key innovative ways that we're recycling batteries so that once they're no longer fit for purpose on the vehicle, they're given a second home. And importantly, that helps the customer manage their technology risk, because Zenobe is essentially holding the battery risk on their behalf. They're going to have a fixed cash flow over the duration of the vehicle, which ensures that they would always have a working battery that meets their route requirements. Another interesting project that we've recently just finished was over with Arriva in London at their Brixton depot. So their key focus for Brixton was all about space. They can currently park 49 vehicles in their depot, and their key concern was that they wanted a high-powered charging solution, but a DC charger, as you can see in this picture here, is actually quite a large unit and can take up quite a bit of a footprint in the depot. And ultimately, Arriva's objective was that they didn't want to lose any space in that depot. So the solution that we've used there is that we've actually used a system whereby the actual technology of the charger can be up to 200 meters away from the slimline front end. So as you can see here, this is a much slimmer unit which goes next to the vehicle, but in terms of all the key bits of equipment and the charger itself, that's actually housed in a container that is outside of the depot, which means that we take up less of a footprint in the depot with the charging infrastructure, and has still allowed Arriva to be able to park the number of vehicles that they wanted in that depot. And then kind of another key case study, and the final one that I'll highlight, was with First Group over in Leeds. And I think the most interesting thing about this project was that they've actually used multiple different bus manufacturers in the depot. So all the other projects that we've worked on so far, all the buses have been the same manufacturer. Clearly that will change over time, but this is the first project that we've worked on where they have introduced different vehicle types. And the important thing to highlight about this project is that on the Zenobe platform, which I'll give you a quick demonstration of shortly, we've been able to integrate all the different chargers and all the different vehicle types onto the platform, which is often a key concern for a number of our customers. So we were really pleased that we've now got a depot that's operational with multiple different vehicle types. So hopefully that's given you a bit of food for thought in terms of innovative ways of accessing power to a depot, that actually operating an electric fleet doesn't necessarily need to be more expensive than operating a diesel fleet, because with innovative solutions from a financing perspective from Zenobe, the cost of the infrastructure and the vehicles can be spread over their useful lives, and the operators can hopefully start benefiting from the lower cost of electricity versus diesel, as well as the lower maintenance costs associated with an electric vehicle versus its diesel counterpart, to hopefully start bringing the total cost of ownership of operating an electric fleet onto parity with a diesel fleet. Innovative solutions around managing battery technology risk and ensuring that as an operator or a fleet provider, you've always got access to a battery that meets the capacity requirements to support the route, whilst ensuring that you don't have any lumpy or high capital cost items over the duration of the project where you have to replace the batteries. The batteries kind of cost about a third of the overall vehicle cost, so they are quite expensive components, and no operator wants to have any high capital expenditure options over the life of the project. So outsourcing that battery replacement risk to Zenobe and essentially letting us provide an extended warranty over the life of the vehicle is something that is available to operators. And finally, I'd say that a key aspect of a project is ensuring that you have a dynamic charging platform to help make your operations as easy as possible, whilst also ensuring that you keep your peak power requirements as low as possible, ensuring that you have enough power to be able to charge the fleet. So if I quickly move across to a demonstration of Zenobe's smart charging platform. Bear with me 2 seconds whilst I log into the platform. You can all see this. If I need to make it a bit bigger, please let me know. So I have got master user access. So these are all of our live sites that are currently on the platform. I'm going to choose our project over with Abellio over in London, where we've currently got those 34 vehicles. So this is just kind of an initial snapshot of that depot in terms of where the vehicles are they on the road, and how much power is being used. So if I click into that depot, the first thing that you would see as an operator is how much power is being used. So this is the system, just to be clear, that all of our customers have access to. Usually they have them on monitors in the depot, on large monitors for the operational team to review those, and then they can also access this on laptops, iPhones, iPads, which they often give to their team working on the ground, so that they're able to monitor their operations. So the first snapshot is all about how much power is being used in the depot. We've actually got a 1.2 megawatt battery supporting the charging requirements of that fleet, which at the moment you can see has got 90% charge. This is quite similar to the diagram that I showed you previously, the graph, in terms of it's giving this is what happened last night over a 24-hour period over at Abellio. So as you can see here, the vehicle load and the power requirements of the fleet overnight. The buses were charging from 7:45 last night all the way up till 5 a.m. in the morning. And as you can see at this point in time over here, the vehicle load went slightly over the 1 megawatt grid capacity that they have at the site, and ultimately the battery was used at that point in time to support the additional power requirements over and above the grid limit. If I click on the depot overview, clearly all the vehicles are pretty much on the road at the moment, so you can't see any vehicles on charge. But what Zenobe does is we split the depot into zones. And essentially we prioritize the charging requirements of certain zones over other zones, so that we can ensure that the vehicles that go out first in the morning are treated as a priority, and can ensure that those are charged before any of the other vehicles. And these are currently the vehicles that are on the road at the moment. So if I bring up the snapshot here, you can see all of our vehicles that are out on service. It gives you their state of charge, how they've been performing from a kilowatt hour or energy efficiency perspective, kilowatt hours per kilometres, what the estimated range is still left on that vehicle. And if you click on each of the individual vehicles, it will give you a breakdown of the distance that vehicle's travelled, what's happened over a 24-hour period from a state of charge perspective, and also what the current temperature is on that vehicle. One of the other interesting areas is the reporting tab, where we provide a whole host of data in terms of what's happened from a charging perspective in respect of the fleet. One of the other interesting bits that some of our customers find quite useful is generally we have a 3D overview of the depot, and overnight what you would see is all the vehicles in their parking positions, and then they have a bar on the top which shows those vehicles as they get filled up with power, and shows what's happening from a charging perspective. We've also got a driving reporting tool, which helps operators train their drivers, given the driver can have a significant impact on the energy efficiency of that fleet. And then we've also got a whole host of data on vehicles, vehicle performance, how that vehicle's specifically been performing, how it's been using its energy, where it's been more efficient, where it hasn't been more efficient. And you can either have that on a daily basis, or you can show that over a 30-day period. So we're using all of this data to help us in terms of our battery management and ensuring that those batteries are maintained as best as possible, which is very much in our interest to do so, given that we own a number of these batteries. We're planning to use them in secondary life applications in 7 to 8 years' time. So we've very much got a vested interest in ensuring that they're being treated, maintained properly, and are ensuring that they are being used as efficiently as possible. So hopefully that's given you a good overview as to Zenobe's full turnkey offering, where we work with our customers to try and make the transition to electric as easy as being open. Some of our customers don't use the full turnkey offering. Some of them just want to use the software. Some of them are keen to use our full charging proposition, but are using other options in terms of their vehicle requirements. And from Zenobe's perspective, kind of our objective is always to meet our customers' requirements. So if our customer does want to focus on using one of our propositions than another, we're more than happy to support them on that basis. As I say, clearly from our perspective, our focus is on making the transition for a bus or a fleet operator as simple and cost effective as possible, and also giving them operational certainty that once all the infrastructure is built and the vehicles arrive, that as a supplier, Zenobe doesn't disappear. That's when the project starts. From our perspective, we're there for the long term to make sure that the vehicles are charged on a daily basis, 24-hour help desk, helping our customers proactively managing the system to try and help them ensure that their operations are as smooth as possible. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen, to understand what Zenobe has to offer. And we're really keen to expand our footprint outside of the UK, got strong ambitions in the North American market and mainland Europe. We're already having success over in Australia. And as I say, a number of our customers who have got footprints outside the UK are also taking us to those geographies, given the relationship that we've established there. And hopefully we can continue that, and would clearly welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Bradley. I think indeed a very insightful presentation, and we are amazed to see how new offerings come to the market when it comes to electric bus fleet electrification. And now I would like to hand over the screen to my colleague Marvin, and he'll be moderating for the question and answer. So over to you, Marvin.
Thank you very much, Rohan, and of course also to you, Bradley. Very interesting what you explained us, and it seems to be that the portfolio of Zenobe is quite big, so to say. So please, to our participants, now is the time to really post your questions into the chat, or raise your hand as well, and then you can directly ask Bradley what would be interesting for you. And as the questions will be dropping in surely in the next minutes and seconds, I maybe start with one of our own. So Bradley, you mentioned, of course, that especially with the one video you showed, that one of your goals is to use the batteries of old electric buses as secondary, in a second life application, so as battery storage for your depot projects. And I was wondering, is there any estimation how long these batteries are going to last in such a second life application?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, Marvin. And ultimately, kind of from our models, It does depend on what the technology of the battery is and how it's been used during its primary life, i.e. what mileage it's been doing, what the topography is of the route, if it's really hilly or not, what the temperature conditions are. But the ambitions are that would hopefully look to be getting another 3 to 5 years worth of application of those batteries in its secondary life application before it needs to be recycled, but that does depend on what application we're going to be using that battery for. So you're quite right. On some of our projects, we're using that as a stationary battery to support the charging requirements of fleets, but then the other applications are we're looking to use them on conferences and events and similar things to Extreme E, like concerts and film studios, where they want to stop using diesel generators and instead move towards using batteries. And then the other application is our wider portfolio of batteries that we're using to support the power requirements for a national grid. So depending upon which of those applications we apply it to will determine how many additional years of use we get. But our kind of initial thoughts are that as a minimum we'll hopefully get 2 to 3 years, but ideally we'll look to get another 5 years of use out of that battery before it needs to be recycled.
Okay, interesting. Thank you very much.
Of course.
So another follow-up question, and maybe from our side, as I see so far the chat box is empty. So again, please feel free to pose your questions. But Rohan has also a question. So Rohan, maybe please go ahead.
Yes. So Bradley, you mentioned that you do provide financing of bus chassis and battery as a storage, battery as a service solutions as well. So in this kind of financing offers which you provide to the electric or the bus fleet operators, what kind of guarantees you look for from the bus operator or the local governments when bringing out this offerings for the bus operators?
Yeah, so we don't really look for guarantees as such. What we do is before we do any project and before we commit to it, we will do, and this is a very open process and we work with the operator on that front, is we will ensure that the vehicle that they're looking to use is suitable and can meet their underlying requirements for the route. So ultimately, all that we look for is kind of an assessment that the technology and the vehicles that they're looking to use is fit for purpose. And then once we're comfortable that it is fit for purpose, the only other kind of requirement that we stipulate from our customers is that we want them to use the vehicles in line with the manufacturer's warranty, and we don't want them to do anything that would invalidate that warranty. But other than that, they're free to use the vehicle as required to complete the agreed route. And what we do is we guarantee that when the battery falls below typically a 75% minimum capacity, that's the point in time when Zenobe will cover the cost of that replacement battery. And where the operator benefits is, rather than looking at something like an extended warranty, which looks to prolong the battery at a 75% useful life, the operator gets access to a brand new battery, 100% capacity, which hopefully in 7 years' time, as battery technology continues to improve and evolve, will enable them to get additional range and additional mileage out of that vehicle. And clearly the operator also has the comfort that they'll know that over the 15-year life of that vehicle, they will always have a battery on that vehicle that meets the mileage requirements for the route that they're looking to operate.
Perfect, thank you. And I see a risen hand by Winfried Damm from GIZ India. Please go ahead, Winfried.
Thank you. Sorry, I missed the initial slides, so excuse my question. Probably you have answered it. I'm an energy expert and not a transport guy. So I'm wondering, why is anyone still purchasing diesel buses? And the second question would be, what are your costs per kilometer? Would you are you able to share a common thing for UK, and probably have you already some customers in Germany and potentially in India? And would you expect that the cost ratio would change there due to the other environments?
Excellent. No, thanks for the question. So I'd say in terms of the first one, diesel versus electric, and why are still operators purchasing diesel? And I think the very simple answer is it comes down to cost. The cost of a diesel vehicle is currently roughly about half the price of an electric vehicle. So if an operator is assessing it on an upfront cost basis, looking at an electric, it is more expensive, and then clearly with electric vehicles you also need to pay for the charging infrastructure to be able to support that fleet.
However, I understood that your package all entirely is cheaper than a conventional diesel life cycle cost.
Yes, so that's what I was just about to go on to say, is that how we try and help operators overcome that, to try and encourage them to switch to electric, is using our model where rather than them having to incur that upfront cost, Zenobe incurs that upfront cost, and hence they're spreading it over the useful life, and it does start to bring the total cost of ownership of an electric vehicle in line with diesel. And in the UK market at the moment, a number of the major operators have pledged that they will no longer buy any new diesel vehicles. So I'm hoping that no operators will continue to buy diesel, but I'll be honest, I think it's more that it's what they know, it's what they're used to. They're confident in operating diesel fleets, and a lot of them are apprehensive about moving to electric because it involves change. And kind of what we're trying to do is to try and help operators overcome their fear of transferring to electric by trying to make the transition as easy as possible. And clearly from our perspective, we only want customers to move to electric, but I can't really answer the question why some are still buying diesel, because I can't see why they are, because hopefully on a total cost of ownership perspective, electric is coming more into parity with diesel. In terms of geographical footprint, at the moment, Zenobe's live and operational in the UK, supporting over about 200 buses. We've got our first project over in Australia with Sydney, where we're supporting 40 single-deck electric buses over there. And we've got a number of projects that are in early stage discussions with operators in mainland Europe and North America. India is an interesting market. We'd like to look at it more closely. One of the manufacturers that we support at the moment is Switch and Optare, who are owned by an Indian corporate. So it's a market that we'd be keen to look at, but the opportunities haven't arisen as yet. And kind of your final question, which is the key one, which is a cost per kilometre. It's really difficult to answer that question, and I'm not trying to avoid it, but it does very much come down to what vehicle type they go for, what charging infrastructure they go for, what the electricity power costs are in the country that they operate. So it's quite difficult to give that answer. But if you did want to follow up and look at a specific case study, we do have a model that we have which focuses on the total cost of ownership, and we could look to do an exercise to try and help compare a diesel fleet versus an electric fleet from a cost per kilometre basis, if you think that would help convince an operator to make the transition.
Thanks.
Thank you for your question.
All right, then I see another question from our colleague Lucius Meyer-Tasch. Lucius, do you want to speak up, or should I read it out?
Okay, I can pose it myself. My question would be whether you're also selling consulting services. For example, you would do so to GIZ projects operating in various countries. In some countries, we're helping, for example, bus operators to design and implement pilot projects. And I guess your experience would be quite interesting. Also, your experience as a practitioner to provide, good consulting services for such projects. Would that be something you'd be interested in? And yeah.
Yeah, no, we'd definitely be interested in it. To date, we haven't done any consulting. Generally, part of our proposition is we provide consultancy on a free of charge basis, because ultimately we need to work with an operator from the outset to highlight to them what can be achieved from an electrification standpoint, try and help them with their power requirements. So to date, kind of all the consulting that we do is kind of free of charge because it's part of the sales process. However, we are looking at the moment because a number of customers have asked us for, can you help us with peak power analysis? Can you help us with designing sites, parking layouts? And yeah, we'd be keen to have other discussions on providing consulting services, because I would say that we're fairly well placed to do it because we're not purely a consultant. Our kind of principal business model is all about owning and operating assets. So we like to think that we're well placed to provide advice on that, rather than whereas some consultancies are purely just consultants and are just picking up information from the market rather than having their own experience of managing operations. So if you've got my contact details, please do drop me a line. I'd welcome a follow-up conversation on that for sure.
All right, thank you.
Perfect. And I see we would have a last question from Insan Rido. If you want, you can also turn on your mic and also camera if you want, and pose it yourself. Otherwise, I'm happy to read it out, of course.
Yeah, thank you. I think I just want to restate my question here. That yeah, I know that you have a different business model compared to other countries in the world. Like in my country, in Indonesia, I think we don't have like a battery leasing or a bus leasing that you have right now. So we have faced a certain issue on deciding the residual value of the battery, since the operators needs to procure the bus, including the chassis and also the battery. So is there any difficulties in your company or in your operators that have worked with you, how to decide the fair residual value? Because yeah, it's different kind of thing that we have in Indonesia. And then is there any impact to the second life of the battery? Let's say if we use it for the solar panels, or maybe we can reuse it for static equipment. Is there any impact on the residual value? So thank you.
No, thank you very much for your question. So in terms of residual values, it's kind of a two-part question, because ultimately we hold the residual value risk on behalf of our customers in the battery, but they always want to understand it, because clearly it influences the rental that they pay over the term of the battery service agreement. But the other question that you always need to consider when you're thinking about residual values is the replacement cost. Because at the moment we kind of see 350 to 400 kilowatt hour batteries in the UK market are usually around somewhere between 125 or 150,000 pounds. And ultimately, if that battery needs to be replaced in 7 or 8 years' time, a lot of the market data suggests that that battery price is going to decrease quite rapidly over time. However, kind of to a degree, what we're seeing is it's not, particularly in the current market, with some scarce metals being harder to mine and issues with supply chain. So in terms of residual values, our customers kind of ask questions about it, because the residual value risk sits with Zenobe, and we also are holding the replacement cost risk. To be honest, they don't really ask a huge amount of questions on that front. All they're really focused on is what is the monthly cost for the battery service, which reflects the residual value that we're holding in that battery. And I think, as highlighted in my earlier answer to kind of your second question, the residual value is definitely impacted by what application you're going to use that battery in its secondary life application. But Zenobe's kind of premise at the model and being very, very open, our ambition and kind of our target at the moment is to build as big a portfolio of batteries as possible, so that as and when 5 years, 6 years, 7 years down the line, when our first vehicles do start needing battery replacements, because kind of our in terms of our portfolio, I think the longest vehicle that we've had on the road is about a year or so. We just want to build as big a portfolio as possible, and in terms of, we don't decide from the outset what application that bus battery is going to be used in its secondary life. We look at it more on a portfolio basis, and as and when we've built our portfolio, we'll have an assessment of our residual values in terms of that portfolio will be spread amongst all the different applications that I kind of highlighted we're going to be using those batteries for.
Wonderful. I think this was a very nice closing. So as we are 1 minute behind the time, I would also hand back to Rohan to close this session. And thank you, Bradley, for your answers. And of course,
thank you for everyone for listening. Really appreciate your time. Very kind of you.
Yes, thank you very much, Marvin, Bradley. I think since we do not have any more questions as well, and we are running out of time, maybe I would like to thank our speaker, Bradley, for taking out time and sharing his insights and also some very interesting offerings of Zenobe here with us. And I would also like to encourage all the participants, if you're interested to see more sessions or you have suggestions on a few topics on which you would like to hear from some industry experts, then please write us back to us. And you can also have see the links of our YouTube and Twitter handles here, wherein you can access our previous videos. So with this, I'd like to thank all of you once again, and hope you have a good rest of your day.